According to the physical evidence, this 3,000-pound Chevy Nova didn't drive into the Utah desert. It materialized there. In this episode, I'm uncovering the Gadianton Canyon time slip that left a car stranded in a physics-defying void. Is it just a hoax, or is it real? You won't want to miss this one. On the morning of Sunday, May 28, 1972, a Utah Highway Patrol trooper named Victoria Lindquist was standing in the middle of the high desert, staring at the ground, trying to make sense of a physics problem that didn't have an answer. Trooper Lindquist, who went by Vic, had been flagged down about an hour earlier by 4 hysterical college women on the side of Highway 56, right near the tiny railroad town of Modena, Utah. The women were terrified. They were crying, they were shaking, and just rambling about being chased by men who weren't men and crashing their car. So Vic had driven them out into the desert to find the vehicle, and sure enough, about 2 miles off the main highway, down at the bottom of a dry ditch called an arroyo, sat a 1971 Chevy Nova. It was banged up, 3 tires were flat, and it was stuck deep in the sand. But that wasn't exactly what was bothering Trooper Lindquist. What was really getting to her was that she would later notice in her official accident report 3 tire tracks. Now, to get a car 2 miles out in the desert, you have to physically drive it there, which means you have to leave the pavement of Highway 56, right? Pretty obvious. You drive over the shoulder and you crush a path through the sagebrush and the scrub all the way to the crash site. But when Vic walked back from the car toward the highway to trace their path, she found something that just didn't make sense. The tire tracks from the Chevy Nova ran for exactly 200 yards behind the car, and then they just suddenly stopped. They did not fade out, they weren't washed away, they just ended right there. Now, beyond that 200-yard mark, the brush was completely undisturbed. There were no broken branches, there was no crushed grass, and there was no tracks leading back to the highway. Now, interestingly, according to the physical evidence at the scene, that 3,000-pound car hadn't driven off the road. It looked like it had fallen out of the sky or materialized out of thin air right in the middle of the desert. Something else interesting was that as Vic walked around the car doing her inventory, she noticed the right front hubcap was missing. One of the things I've realized over the last year when I'm deep in research, just looking at reports and documents, the last thing I really want to think about is meal planning. I either used to skip meals or default to just going to the store and just buying whatever and throwing it together. And neither of those are great long-term strategies. That's why I actually started using HelloFresh. And here's what I like about it. It's not flashy, it's not complicated, it just works. HelloFresh is America's #1 meal kit. They've delivered over 1 billion meals and more than 9 million people have used it, which makes sense because they've dialed this thing in. What surprised me is that you don't get just 20 to 30 recipe options. You get 100 plus choices every single week. And a lot of them are high protein, which I've been really trying to focus on lately. They have 15 plus high protein recipes each week, so you're not just carving out and calling it done for dinner. And most meals take only about 30 minutes or less, which is honestly faster than waiting for delivery or, going to the store and just trying to panic buy a meal. What's great is everything shows up at your door, so no grocery store, you're not forgetting ingredients, none of that. Oh, I thought we had that in the fridge. Oh, I gotta run back to the store. It's nice not to even think about that. And I like that I can pause, skip weeks, or swap meals whenever I need to. There's no weird commitment. For me, it's just removed all the friction. So instead of thinking, what am I eating tonight? I already know, and I'm cooking a real meal at home. Use my code LurksFM at HelloFresh.com for 10 free meals plus free shipping. Free meals applied as discount on first box, new or recurring subscribers only, and varies by plan. Sign up today. Click the link below or use my code LurksFM at HelloFresh.com. So she walked the entire length of those 200-yard tracks looking for it, and she had the girls look for it too. They looked in the brush, they looked everywhere, even in the ditch. And folks, there was no sign of a hubcap. Now, if you believe the story the girls told Trooper Lindquist that morning, that hubcap wasn't lost in the desert. It was still rolling down a white cement road in a place that just doesn't exist on map. Now, we need to understand something. Now, let's back up a little bit and go to the previous night around 10:30 p.m., which was on Saturday, May 27th. At the time, a 21-year-old student named Jana North was behind the wheel of that same Chevy Nova, driving east out of Pioche, Nevada. The car belonged to her father, and she had 3 passengers with her: her sister Carol, their cousin Bethany, and a friend Lisa. And all 4 of them were students at Southern Utah University in Cedar City. Now, on this day, they had spent it at a rodeo in Pioche, and they had stayed a little too long. And now, because they were exhausted and they wanted to get back in time, they were racing against the clock. They had a very strict midnight curfew back at their dorms. And if they missed it, they were going to be in big trouble with the house mother. Jana was pushing the Nova pretty hard, trying to make up time on Highway 56. And if you guys have ever been on this road, it's a very lonely, desolate stretch of road. I mean, there is nothing out there for miles. It's just black asphalt, there's sagebrush. I mean, you are in the middle of the desert. Eventually, they crossed the state line into Utah and hit the railroad crossing at Medina. Now, Medina isn't really a town. It's kind of just a couple of shacks and a rail depot. It's basically what you'd call a ghost town. But as they crossed the tracks, Jana saw something right away that confused her. Now, according to Jana, just past the tracks, the road forked to the right. The highway continued southeast towards Cedar City. But to the left, there was another road branching off to the northeast, heading toward the Red Rock Canyons. So Jana did a quick mental calculation. I mean, she knew the geography roughly, and she figured if she cut northeast through the canyons, she could shave about 20 minutes off the drive and make the curfew. She didn't consult a map, she just made a snap decision, and she jerked the wheel to the left and took the fork. Now, as the Nova rumbled down this new northeast fork, the atmosphere changed noticeably. I mean, just a moment ago, everyone had been laughing and, complaining about the house mother. They were probably listening to something on the radio. But as they crossed this threshold, the radio all of a sudden just went dead silent. And the girls had never heard anything like that before, because usually if that happens, it loses signal, there's static, there's white noise, but this was just total void. And even outside, the desert noise vanished too. Now, for any of you who have spent any time in the high desert, it's never truly quiet because you got the wind and the sagebrush, the crickets, the coyotes. But Jana even noticed that the air pressure just dropped and the darkness outside became so dense that she described it as oppressive. It's like they were driving into a tunnel, even though the roof was open to the sky. It was in this heavy, suffocating darkness that the headlights caught the change. Now, at first, it was like this subtle vibration, and then even the sounds of like the gravel under the tires just stopped. And then the black asphalt beneath them just disappeared. And it became instantly replaced by this glowing bone-white cement. They had somehow crossed the threshold, not just a threshold, but the threshold. Interestingly, if you look at a map of Medina from 1972 or even today, there is no northeast fork. There is a dirt ranch road, but nothing that looks like a highway. But Jana and the 3 other girls all swore there was a paved road, and they took it. Now, even though this was going on, for the first few moments, everything seemed okay. They were driving through a narrow canyon with high red walls on either side. But then the surface of the road changed, and the girls felt that vibration in the car shift. And even the tires sounded different because they were no longer on asphalt, but they could hear the tires moving onto something harder and smoother. And so Jana, not really knowing what else to do or exactly where she was at, she just turned on her high beams, and they saw that the black asphalt was now completely gone, and they were driving on bright white cement. It was literally glowing in the headlights like It was almost luminescent. And there were no painted lines. There was no clear yellow divider. There was no shoulder lines. It was just a ribbon of white stone winding through the canyon. Now, Carol, at the time, who was in the passenger seat, began asking Jana, like, where are we? Like, did you drive into a construction site? I've never seen this before. It is so weird. Where are we? And after discussing it further, neither of them knew, and they just figured the state was probably repaving this shortcut and hadn't painted the lines in yet. It was a simple rationalization. Figuring that was the case, they drove on this white road for about 10 minutes, winding deeper and deeper, and with zero warning, the road just ended. So Jana slammed on the brakes, and the Nova skidded on the white cement and then came to a halt just inches from a sheer cliff face. There were no road closed signs, no orange barrels, reflectors. The white road just ran straight into a wall of red sandstone. As you can imagine, the scene was pretty tense. I mean, the girls were frustrated, to put it lightly. Jana slammed her hands on the steering wheel, and now they had to turn around and backtrack all the way and take the long way. And as you know, now they're not gonna make the curfew. Extremely upset by the situation, Jana threw the car into reverse, she whipped it around, and she started driving back the way they came. But as they drove back down the white road, everything felt different. Like it felt longer and the walls seemed higher. And then they burst out of the canyon mouth. Now, normally, when you come out of the canyons near Medina, you are looking at high desert. It's dirt, there's scrub oak, it's dry and brown, but when they came out of there, they all gasped. They weren't in the desert anymore. On the left side of the road, there were massive fields of grain, wheat or barley, swaying in the wind, and on the right, there was a thick forest of tall ponderosa pines. And beyond that, they could see the shimmering reflection of a massive lake. Now, as you can imagine, they probably had no idea what was going on because this geography does not exist in southern Utah. I mean, you would have to drive hundreds of miles north or climb thousands of feet in elevation to even find pine forest and lakes like that. And somehow, there they were. Now, in addition to this, there was also the light. Now, when they had left the rodeo, it was a very dark, moonless night. But now, the entire landscape in front of them was bathed in this very bright, almost silvery moon-like light. And so they looked up and they saw a full moon hanging in the sky. None of them, they were all very freaked out, but none of them could even rationalize this. The only thing they could think was that we must have got turned around somewhere. We must have driven up into the mountains without realizing it. I mean, there's no other way this could be possible. But realistically, they haven't been driving long enough to reach the mountains. And the alternative of them not being in Utah anymore was just too scary to consider. And so they kept driving, looking for a road sign, looking for anything familiar. And that's when they saw the light ahead. It was actually a building on the side of the road, and it looked like a roadhouse or a tavern. There were lights on inside and a neon sign buzzing on the roof. And Jana, who was overcome with relief, just sighed out loud and she's like, okay, we got this. We can ask somebody for directions and finally put an end to this madness. So she pulled the Nova into the gravel parking lot, and there were no other cars there, just this building sitting alone in the pine forest. And as they got closer, the girls tried to read the neon sign on the roof to see where they were, but they couldn't make it out. And it wasn't that the bulbs were burnt out, it was the letters. And the girls, they described them later as squiggles. I mean, to them it looked like calligraphy, but not in any language they recognized. And it clearly wasn't English or Spanish. Jana was like, you know what, it's probably a stylized brand logo, or maybe we're just tired from fatigue and we just can't make out what it is. So quickly thinking, she pulled the car up near the front door, put it in park, and she kept the engine running. The front door of the roadhouse swung open and this group of men walked out. They were all very tall and they seemed visibly agitated. They're waving their arms and shouting back at somebody inside the bar. Now, Lisa, who was in the back seat, rolled down her window and she's trying to get a better listen to what's happening. And she leaned out to shout at them to ask, hey, which way to Cedar City. And the men stopped. They turned and looked at the car. And in that moment, the light from the neon lights on the roof just kind of hit their faces. And in that moment, the reality of things just smacked all four of them. As Jana idled the car in the gravel lot, they tried to get a read on where they were. They looked up at that buzzing neon sign on the roof, hoping for a beer brand or a town name. The sounds coming out of their mouths were harsh, guttural, and rhythmic. I mean, it was a language that didn't sound human. Jana rolled down the window just an inch, and the air that drifted in didn't smell like the desert. It actually smelled like ozone, like the air right after a lightning strike. And it was in that moment, smelling that electric air and hearing those distorted voices, that Lisa leaned forward, got a good look at the tall man standing nearest to the car, and she realized his face didn't fit his skull. Lisa is freaking out. She's screaming, punch it, they aren't human. Jana didn't ask questions. She didn't look to verify. She just reacted to the primal terror in her friend's voice. She slammed her foot onto the gas pedal. The Nova's tires spun and they just flew out of there. As they sped, Jana kept looking in the rearview mirror. The men, whoever they saw, weren't running after them. They were running toward a set of vehicles parked around the side of the building. So Jana got the car back onto the white cement road and she floored it. She was doing like 90, and then she could see them in the mirror. There were 4 vehicles chasing them, but the strangest part was these weren't guys in trucks. They weren't even cars. They were shaped like eggs. They were small, white, oval pods, and they didn't have 4 wheels. They had 3, 2 in the front, 1 in the back. And they also didn't sound like cars. There was no roar of a V8. Instead, even over the sound of her own engine and the wind rushing by, she could hear this high-pitched whining buzz, like a giant mosquito or even an electric drill. Regardless, these things were incredibly fast. They were gaining on the Nova, gliding over the cement like they were on rails. And at this point, the girls were screaming, they're inconsolable. And Bethany, who's in the back with Lisa, kept looking out the window and she just keeps screaming, they're catching up, we're in trouble, they're gonna get us. And so eventually Jenna saw the canyon mouth ahead and the rock walls were just glowing with the moonlight. And she knew that the canyon road was twisty and very dangerous, but it was their only cover. So she knew what they had to do. She dove the car into the canyon, and the white road was narrow here, and she did her best to fight the wheel, taking corners at very dangerous speeds. But the buzzing sound of the A cars was getting louder, and they were right behind them. And she had an idea. She knew the shoulder of the road was soft sand, and so she jerked the wheel to the right, dropping her passenger side tires off the cement into the dirt. The Nova kicked up a massive thick cloud of red dust, and it kind of billowed up behind them, filling the narrow canyon, blocking the view, and she kept her foot pinned to the floor. She couldn't see the pursuers anymore through the dust, but she could still hear the noise. It took her quite a while, but she raced through to the end, and the dark opening led them back out to the desert. And this is where Janet braced herself because she shot out of the canyon mouth at nearly 100 miles per hour, and then, all of a sudden, it was like this instantaneous change. 1 second, they were on white cement, surrounded by pine trees and the strange light, and the next, the white road vanished. The moon vanished, the pine trees vanished, and the car was suddenly airborne. They had shot out of the canyon and launched off a small ridge, flying over the rough desert scrub of the real Highway 56 landscape. Bam! The Nova slammed into the ground, it bounced, fishtailed wildly through the sagebrush, and then slid off. The car eventually crunched to a halt at the bottom of the ditch. The engine stalled, the headlights cut out, and then it was just quiet. And at this point, it was so dark out, the only light came from the stars. And so the girls sat there, terrified, not sure what to do. They were listening to the ticking of the cooling engine. They're waiting there for these 3-wheeled cars to come over the ridge and get them, but they never saw them, and the crash had obviously destroyed the engine, plunging all 4 of them into total darkness. And being in that state where they're in this car and it is completely pitch black outside, I mean, it was terrifying. Now, for the next 6 hours, until the sun finally came up, the four friends huddled together in the wrecked Nova, too terrified to open the doors. And every time the wind rustled, a sagebrush, or, a jackrabbit skittered across the sand, they froze because they were expecting to see those bizarre single headlight egg cars just cresting the ridge. Lisa, who was in the back, just wouldn't stop sobbing. She kept touching her face and checking her own skin as if to reassure herself that she was still human. And they all four had the terrifying realization that if these people or things were to get them, they would have nowhere to go. They were miles from the nearest highway, and they were sitting ducks. Eventually, the sun did come, and they climbed out of the wrecked Nova. They were bruised and still very shaken and exhausted, but they were alive. And so they made the group decision that they were gonna hike 2 miles south through the brush until they hit the pavement of Highway 56. That's when they flagged down Trooper Vic Lindquist. Now, according to the records cited by UFO researcher Joseph Trainer in his 2000 report on this case, Trooper Lindquist filed the accident report just like any other crash. But she included the details that didn't add up. She documented the hysterical state of the passengers, and she documented Lisa's repeated claim that the men weren't human. Most importantly, she documented the tracks. When Trooper Lindquist stood there in the desert looking at the marks that started in the middle of nowhere, she knew she was looking at something that couldn't be explained by reckless driving or a wrong turn. And that's because there were no tracks leading from the highway. The car hadn't driven there, it had arrived. And as for the missing hubcap, they never found it. The girls believe that when the car snapped back into our reality, it didn't make the jump. They believe that it popped off during the chase or the transition, which means that somewhere in a parallel dimension on a white cement road winding through a pine forest that shouldn't exist, there is a 1971 Chevy Nova hubcap lying in the dirt waiting to be found. What's even more interesting about this case is that a lot of people in the area named it after the Gadianton robbers, who were a band of thieves and assassins from the Book of Mormon, who were said to hide in the mountains and use secret pathways to move undetected. Now, for 100 years, people in that part of Utah have told stories about travelers going into this canyon and disappearing. Janet and her friends were lucky. I mean, they came back, but they didn't come back whole. They came back with a story that, unfortunately for them, nobody believed. Now look, this is just me right now. If I had read this story and looked into it in isolation, and I didn't look into all the topics and stuff that we all go over on this channel, I would probably just say it's fake, it's a hoax. But after going over so many strange cases, you can't help but wonder, what if? I mean, after all, the truth is stranger than fiction, and whether or not they really did have some sort of sci-fi experience where they went into some sort of parallel dimension, I don't know. Well, folks, you know the answer. It remains a mystery. And because you guys made it this far, I want you to all comment down below parallel dimensions. So that way I know who made it to the end and who didn't. And if you guys enjoy storytelling like this, where we dive into true, strange cases of the mysterious and supernatural, what are you waiting for? Smack that like and subscribe button right now for more content just like this. And as always, never forget, I love you all, keep an open mind, and I'll see you all in the very next episode.